Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that's so shocking, you might find it hard to believe it happened in the middle of an ordinary morning in America. That day, the town of Binghamton, New York, was wrapped in its usual calm. People went to work, students headed to school, and in a small corner of the city, immigrants gathered in a classroom, eager to learn English and start a new chapter of their lives. But just a few hours later, this place would become the scene of one of the deadliest mass shootings in New York State's history. The gunman wasn't a notorious criminal, nor was he a stranger wandering in from the streets. He was a former student who had once sat in that very classroom. Jiverly Wong, a quiet, seemingly harmless man, walked in carrying 2 handguns and turned an ordinary morning into a living nightmare. What could drive an otherwise ordinary man to end everything in a storm of bullets and bloodshed? Let's dive deep into this case to find the answer. Part 1, An Outsider in His Own Life. Jiverly Wong was born in 1967, into a family of Chinese, Vietnamese descent. His early life was far from idyllic. When his family immigrated to the United States, they carried the same dream shared by millions, the promise of a better life. But for Wong, the so-called land of opportunity would slowly turn into a place filled with frustration and silent resentment. When he first arrived in California, Wong faced his biggest obstacle, language. English never came easily to him. In everyday situations, he struggled to find the right words, stumbling over grammar and pronunciation. It wasn't just communication, it was dignity. Each time he mispronounced a word or failed to understand a question, he felt the sting of humiliation. One day, after another awkward interaction, he confided to someone he knew. "I study and study, but I can't speak like them. I think they laugh behind my back every single day." It wasn't a dramatic outburst, but rather a quiet confession that revealed a deep-seated insecurity. In November 1995, Wong became a U.S. citizen. He tried to settle into the rhythm of American life, eventually landing a job at the Shopvac manufacturing plant. The work was steady, the paycheck enough to get by, but Wong never truly felt part of the team. He kept to himself, avoided small talk, and rarely engaged with coworkers beyond what was necessary. A former colleague later recalled, "He never looked you in the eye. Always kept his head down, did his job, and left as soon as the shift ended." For years, this routine, work, go home, stay isolated, was his entire life. But in late 2008, that fragile balance collapsed. Wong was laid off. Losing the job meant more than losing income, it stripped away the one place where he could still pretend to belong. From that moment, he began to spiral, withdrawing further, nursing quiet grudges, and letting his resentment harden into something far darker. What no one realized was that this isolation wasn't just a personal struggle. It was planting the seeds for a tragedy that would shake the quiet town of Binghamton to its core. Part 2, The Slow-Burning Fire of Resentment. After losing his job in late 2008, Jiverly Wong's life seemed to lose whatever fragile meaning it once had. Before, even though he was quiet, withdrawn, and always on the fringes of conversations, he still had work to cling to, a reason to get out of bed each morning. Now, each day began the same, waking up to 4 silent walls and the heavy stillness that filled his small home. Neighbors recalled that they rarely saw him outside anymore. On the rare occasions they did, he would quickly avert his gaze if someone looked at him. Some began to whisper, something's wrong with that guy, though no one guessed how deep the problem truly ran. In the months after his layoff, Wong spent most of his time alone in his room, staring at his computer screen. But he wasn't searching for a new job. Instead, he was writing, pouring his thoughts into bitter, angry words. In his mind, he was a victim of a vast conspiracy. He believed the police were secretly following him, that someone was always trying to humiliate him. In a letter later made public, Wong wrote, "I cannot go on living. They follow me everywhere, laugh at me, make me into a joke. I have endured enough." These thoughts didn't appear overnight. They had been building for years, starting with the shame of struggling to speak English, the constant feeling of being an outsider, and then the final blow, losing his job. That was the match dropped into a barrel of gunpowder that had been sitting, drying, for decades. When someone asked why he had stopped attending the English classes at the American Civic Association, Wong replied bluntly, "It's useless. I can't learn anything. They just see me as a fool." That short answer revealed so much. A man who no longer believed in himself, who was convinced that everyone else saw him as worthless. And so, day after day, his resentment didn't fade, it sharpened. In his mind, he began to picture payback. No longer just angry words on a page, the idea solidified into something more tangible, a plan. A plan that, in his mind, would finally make the world remember the name Jiverly and Terry's Wong, not with respect, but with pure, unshakable fear. Part 3, The Fateful Day, April 3, 2009. The morning of April 3, 2009, Binghamton City was still wrapped in the same peaceful calm as any other day. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the windows, waking people up for a new day. At the American Civic Association Immigration Center, where many immigrants hoped to start a new chapter in their lives, English classes began as usual. But no one could have guessed that within that very space, a terrible nightmare was waiting to unfold. Just after 10 a.m., Jiverly Wong drove his father's car to the back entrance of the building. What seemed like a small act was actually a calculated move, effectively blocking the escape route for those inside. Wong wore a heavy bulletproof vest and carried two handguns, a 9mm Beretta 92 FS Bertec Inox and a .45 caliber Beretta PX-4 Storm. Every detail was meticulously prepared, revealing his cold determination. As he stepped inside, he silently scanned the surroundings. The atmosphere was still normal, people were focused on studying or working. A receptionist, busy answering a phone call, suddenly heard gunfire. The first shot exploded like a storm, shattering the quiet air. The receptionist collapsed to the floor, blood pooling around her. Panic screams erupted. Everyone began running, searching for places to hide, trying to escape. One English class student recalled, "I heard the gunshots, then people screaming everywhere. Everyone was terrified, scrambling for cover. Some fell, others crawled through rooms to dodge the bullets. One wounded person played dead, holding their breath and staying silent, waiting until Wong left before crawling out to call for emergency help." Wong didn't stop there. He marched straight into an English classroom where about 25 students were seated. In just a few short minutes, he brutally killed 12 people. The scene was utter chaos, overturned chairs and desks, cries and screams echoing everywhere. The survivors panicked, desperately seeking any way out of that living hell. After committing the massacre, Wong turned the gun on himself, ending his painful journey and becoming the final killer in the tragedy. Outside, police were called to the scene immediately. They rushed inside to face an unbelievable sight: blood splattered everywhere, bodies scattered on the floor, and wounded people crying out for help. A police officer recalled, "We couldn't believe the brutality. It was an unimaginable tragedy. The lives of 13 innocent people were stolen in an instant, leaving deep pain for families and the community. And the cruelest part, those victims had once only seen Wong as a quiet, withdrawn man, a distant figure nobody thought capable of such horror." Part 4: Aftermath and National Shockwaves. Immediately after the shooting ended, news of the tragedy at the American Civic Association spread rapidly across the United States. The image of an ordinary morning turning into a bloody massacre shook the entire nation, leaving communities stunned and grieving. 13 lives were lost forever, many of whom were immigrants, people who had come to America carrying hopes of a better future, only to be brutally cut down in a place they trusted as their new home. 4 others were seriously injured, with some surviving due to their quick thinking and courage amid chaos. The victims' families were plunged into unimaginable grief. They had lost loved ones, friends, and colleagues, individuals who had been part of their dreams of the American dream. But this tragedy was not just a personal loss. It reignited the long-standing and deeply divisive debate over gun violence in America. Once again, the question arose: how could individuals like Wong obtain and wield deadly weapons so easily? Lawmakers, advocacy groups, and citizens engaged in heated debates. Some called for stricter gun control laws, arguing that tighter regulations were essential to prevent future massacres. Others insisted that the right to bear arms is a fundamental American value that must be preserved. Beyond the political discourse, Wong's story raised urgent concerns about the early detection and intervention for individuals with mental health struggles. Prior to the shooting, Wong had sent letters expressing distress, claiming he was being followed and harassed. Unfortunately, these warnings were either ignored or not taken seriously enough. This revealed a glaring gap in the mental health care system and social support networks for vulnerable individuals. Social isolation, lack of timely help, and unaddressed psychological distress can fester, turning into tragedies that devastate entire communities. In the wake of the shooting, many organizations and local communities intensified efforts to provide mental health counseling, immigrant integration programs, and social connection initiatives, aiming to prevent similar tragedies from occurring again. Moreover, the incident underscored the critical need to raise public awareness about mental health and teach people how to recognize warning signs of danger in those around them. It also served as a sobering reminder that loneliness and alienation can thrive even within densely populated communities, and that a single spark of despair can ignite an unimaginable rage. The Jiverly Wong case stands as a heartbreaking example. If society fails to pay attention to the quiet ones, failing to identify and support them early, tragedies like this will sadly continue to happen. Part 5: Reflections on a Tragedy. The massacre carried out by Jiverly Wong is not only a horrific event but also a stark warning about the hidden dangers lurking within modern society. Looking back, one cannot help but ask, could this tragedy have been prevented? Were the warning signs missed or ignored? Or has society become too indifferent to those living in isolation and despair? Wong's story reveals how social isolation, helplessness in the face of mental struggles, combined with environmental pressures and personal insecurities, can drive a person to a desperate breaking point. The issue extends far beyond gun control laws and regulations. It touches on the need for greater understanding and care for mental health, and the importance of inclusion and connection within communities. We need to learn to listen more attentively, to recognize and reach out to those silently suffering, rather than dismissing them as strangers or problems to avoid. Family, friends, and communities serve as vital support systems to ensure no one feels utterly alone in life. A simple act of kindness, a timely word of concern, can transform the course of someone's mental state and future. Ultimately, this tragedy forces us to contemplate how to build a safer society, one where stories like Jiverly Wong's no longer find fertile ground. Let this story serve as a solemn reminder: no one should be left behind, and every one of us carries the responsibility to foster a compassionate, understanding, and caring community. As we reflect on the tragic story of Jiverly Wong, we are left with a profound question. How can we, as individuals and as a society, better recognize and support those who are silently struggling before it's too late? This case reminds us that behind every quiet person, every outsider, there may be a story of pain, loneliness, and desperation waiting to be heard. It challenges us to look beyond appearances and reach out with empathy and understanding. Thank you for watching and staying with us through this difficult story. Your time and attention matter, and together, we can raise awareness, foster compassion, and work toward preventing such tragedies in the future. If you found this video meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. We'll see you in the next video.